A lot of you guys are wondering why it seems that so many women in 2025 are just undateable or incapable of relationships. And you're smart enough to know that, okay, not all women are like that. However, it does certainly seem like all the women that you tend to date are, in fact, like that and not able to be a good relationship partner. I've had so many guys coaching with me ask me that question, like, why are all these women so broken? Like, why is it when even when I find somebody that I like and it seems to be going good, it's like I have to unravel trauma and problems and past experiences with this woman, or we have to like learn how to communicate in a healthy way because she just doesn't have those skills in communication. Now, understand, I know a lot of guys don't have those skills either, but the guys who are coming to me for coaching are learning those skills. So they're learning and getting the communication skills. And then they're finding that women in the dating market simply don't have those skills. So, what is up with all these broken women? It boils down to one thing, actually, and I'll break it down for you in this video. I'm Paul, behavioral and mental performance expert, and today's mindset topic is why does it seem like women are just incapable of relationships or dating right now in 2025? Well, as you'll see, I'm going to break down some numbers for you. It does certainly seem like all women are incapable. It's not all women, but women definitely have an uphill battle. And the reason they have an uphill battle is down to this one thing. And that one thing is sex too early and too often. It's not that sex is bad. I'm a proponent of good sex amongst adults. In fact, part of my coaching is to teach guys how to be better at sex and how to have better sexual relationships with their sexual partners. But that's in an adult population, okay? The one number one reason why women are so broken today is because of how we're approaching sex with teens and kids. And teenagers and teenage girls are losing their virginity way too early. They're starting sexual relationships way too early. And then they're getting into too frequent of sexual behavior too early. And it's being damaging to their actual brain development. And that's the thing that people aren't talking about is how damaging these girls are to their own brain development with their behavior that adults are more or less promoting or not really pushing back on. Everyone wants to talk about the morality of sex. You know, you have your religious folks who will talk about the religious aspect of things. People will talk about STIs or unwanted pregnancies, but no one's talking about brain development. And so women are just starting with sex too early and continuing that process. By the time they get to you on that dating app or you meet her at that function or whatever, she's had a series of bad experiences and imprinted bad behaviors and bad habits, so to speak, going all the way back to when she first started having sex, which could be 14, 15, 16 years old. And so that's the reason why women are generally so broken. Now, let me share with you this fun little fact because everybody seems to think that women were having sex earlier back in the 1950s. There's this myth that's out there that women were having sex at younger ages, 50, 60, 100 years ago, and that, they were still getting in marriages and there were less divorces. So sex among teens must be okay. Well, that actually isn't true when you look at the data. The average age a woman lost her virginity in the 1950s was 21 years old. So women were getting married much earlier, for sure, and were having a lot less sex partners, but they were not starting having sex until much later. Whereas the average age today in the United States is 17. So right off the bat, we can see a correlation. We can already see just on the surface a correlation here. 1950s era people in the United States had less sexual partners, were more capable of keeping their long-term relationships, and sex started later. around 21 on average. So we can already see on the surface what that looks like. We know that teenagers today are having sex, and most teenagers have had sex before they complete high school. So how does it translate to you in the dating market as an adult today, right? And most of my clients are above the age of 30, although I got a few who are in their 20s for sure. So what's happening in the dating market? Well, this is kind of the breakdown now of what you're looking at. Let's look at sexual behavior and how it affects their mental health and how it affects their ability to long-term pair bond or have good relationship and dating skills later on. So we look at women from the age of 18 to 24, around college age, right? So by the times around 18 to 24, a third of women are actually sexless. So what's gone up in the last 15 years is more voluntary and involuntary celibates. Now, you would think, oh, well, that must mean that women are going to be more capable then of having long term relationships because one third of women are not out being promiscuous at all. In fact, they're not even really having sex. Well, the problem with that theory is it's not taking into account all of the unmateable options amongst that cohort. So you're looking at women who are more morbidly obese with more health problems, for example, today than 15 years ago. You're looking at more mental health issues that would prevent them from having sexual relationships. More so today, more higher incidences of autism, for example, higher incidences of mental disability, mental problems, depression, anxiety, higher incidences of social problems, which means they're not going to be able to have good friendships, good social relationships, which means they're not going to meet guys and they're not going to end up having sex with those guys. So, yes, there are definitely more women who are more celibate, and that's bringing those averages down, so to speak, or and changing those averages, because the average is including women who are involuntary celibates, which, believe it or not, there's quite a few. Now, you don't know there's so many involuntary celibates because they're not on a dating app. You don't see them out on the town. That's not the girl you're trying to approach. So just like 80% of men are invisible to most women, about one third of women are invisible to you if you're out in the dating market right now. One third of women, 18 to 24, they've had 0 to 1 sex partners. Only a very small percentage of those women are going to be voluntary celibates who are sexually marketable and good options for being in a relationship or dating. All right. So that's going to be a very, very small percentage. Usually they probably are somewhere in the religious communities, be it Christian, Islam, or they're at or Judaism, right? They're going to be a part of a religious community where celibacy is a part of their life, and they're going to have they're going to be closed off more. They're going to be harder to find. That's going to be very, very few women. And those women are still going to be influenced by the world and influenced now by some of their religious social circles, which might be equally or more dysfunctional than some of the secular areas. Like, just because someone's religious, that doesn't mean they're better or more functional. Some religious people are certainly more functional than secular people, but a lot of religious people are not too. So there is no promise if you come across a girl who has been a voluntary, involuntary celibate, at least up to this point in her life, that she's going to be a good mating option. It's going to be a very, very small percentage. There'll be some, for sure. There'll be some girls who have chosen to not have sex and they're holding off for marriage or a long-term relationship. That is going to be very, very few girls. And a lot of girls who are doing that are doing it out of necessity because of other emotional, mental, and social problems that they have versus doing it because they want to do it because they're delaying their gratification and planning for the future. So you have this one third of women that you're not even seeing. They're not even on the dating market. You're seeing the other 2/3. Okay. So among the other 2/3, the ones that you're approaching, the ones that are good dating options for you, we can split them up into two parts. Now, these one third numbers are approximate based on research. So some research might say you know, might say 33% or 30% or whatever. Like there's different test samples, different research, but from what we can see, this is a good basic estimate to get our minds wrapped around what's happening in the dating market. So with one third of women are serial monogamous. That means they've had 4 to 9 sex partners. Okay. So these are more of your relationship minded women. These are the ones who maybe had sex too early, they had their first boyfriend 16, 17 or whatever. They have sex with that boyfriend, but they stay with that guy for a year or a year and a half or something like that. And then they go to the next relationship, right? They're relationship minded. So, at the very least, with this one third, you're dealing with somebody who might be capable of a long term relationship. Now, we're going to get into why there's still a lot of difficulty here, given having sex too early and what that experience causes for a young girl. But we have one third that are lower in notch count. You see that because they're not out having promiscuous sexual experiences. They're not going through their 304 phase, right? They're and so they're not going through that promiscuous phase for a year where they sleep with a bunch of guys in college. All right, so these girls are their notches tend to be a little bit lower, more reasonable, so to speak, between 18 and 24, and they tend to be more of a one guy kind of girl, right? They want to get into a relationship. Now, they're not necessarily good for long-term relationship because what they're practicing is serial monogamy. So they might sleep with a guy for 6 months to a year, and then they switch to a different guy after that relationship fizzles out. And we'll get into that. But that leaves us to the last cohort here. We're looking at one third of women roughly who are promiscuous. They have 10 plus sexual partners between ages of 18 24. These girls are starting having sex early and they're having sex often and they're doing it outside of the context of a relationship. Now, these girls are going to be very quick to next you on the dating app. They're the ones who will talk to you for a little bit and then they just get cold for no reason, right? They're the ones who will sleep with you oftentimes right away, but will bring toxicity and drama into your life. They're the ones who are going to cheat on you. They're the ones who will bring you potentially the most problems. Okay. And that's because of what this promiscuous pattern creates, especially when a girl starts that pattern at a young age. And so now let's go. So now that we have these numbers and we understand them, okay, let's look at the distribution of sexual activity by women by age. So when we start to get below the age of 15, the data gets kind of tough. So because there's just the numbers get a little bit all over and it's kind of hard for researchers to get an honest answer on this. But age 13, we can estimate 5 to 10% of 13-year-olds, going into 14, they're sexually active. So girls are losing their virginity at age 12, at age 13, a small percentage. So you can figure close to 1 in 10 girls that you meet had sex between the age of 12 and let's say 14, right? Then we get into 15-year-olds, okay? About 30% of 15-year-olds are sexually active. So we're getting closer to now that one third promiscuous number. Now, it's not going to be a one-to-one thing. Some girls who start having sex at 15 end up being more of a serial monogamy person and not necessarily a promiscuous person. And some girls who have sex later end up being promiscuous and not the serial monogamist. But we see a correlation here at least. You're getting close to that one third number. By age 15, girls are sexually active. By age 17, 17 is the average age in the Western world for women having sex and losing their virginity. So notice the difference. It was 21 in 1950. It's 17 now in 2025. And so about 50% to a little over 50% of young girls, 17 years old, are sexually active. Then at age 19, you get closer to about 83%. You're getting closer to 100% now. And then it's over 90% now are sexually active or have had sexual experiences past the age of 21. Now you have to understand though, all these numbers are skewed. Okay. When I say sexually active here, I mean some of those girls are involuntary celibates who've had sex at least one time by the time they're 21. All right. But these numbers are skewed if you take out, which I can't find research that will do this. It would be great to find it. But if you take out the one third cohort that are celibate women, and you look at just the two thirds who are sexually active, okay, out in the dating market, these numbers are all going to go up. All right. There's going to be more girls who had sex between the ages of 12 and 14 amongst the sexually active cohort versus the celibate cohort, right? Obviously, there's this 30% is going to go up probably to 50% or so if you look at the girls who are sexually active versus not. So you have to understand, right? Like these numbers and all these numbers are taking into account the celibate and involuntary celibate women who've had sex 0 to 1 times. They're not in the dating market. And that's a whole one third of people. And that, that had increased from like 20, 25% or something, in 15 years ago. So if you're looking at it, if you take out that cohort that you don't even see as a man, all these numbers go up. All right. So this isn't a 50% of women now anymore. It's probably closer to 70 some percent or whatever. Okay. Have lost their virginity before the age of 17 and so on and so on. Though all those numbers go up by the time when you look at that. Now, why? So then to look at promiscuity in general, over half of college age women right now, 18 to 22, have had sex within the past 4 weeks. So over half, close to 55, 60% are pretty sexually active and sexually active all the time. Now, again, I'm all for sexual activity amongst adults. Okay. Go get yours, have fun, do what you want, because as an adult, your brain is developed. So the problem we run into, you can see when we look at brain, like the brain development. All right. And so the 13-year-old brain and the less developed is the green and the yellow. Okay. A 13-year-old's having sex. They don't even have their emotional areas of their brain fully developed yet. Their logical areas are developing. Okay. But their judgment and their emotional self-control, it's just not there yet. A 13-year-old is a child still. Okay. They may be able to think, act, talk, communicate pretty well. And they may have the physical capability of being sexually active, but that brain is not mature yet. So what happens when a girl is having sex and her brain isn't mature yet is that she is imprinting patterns into that brain while the brain is still growing. And that creates damage and problems because she is not fully emotionally developed yet to be able to process a sexual relationship in a healthy way. Not to mention all of the emotions and the emotional roller coaster of a sexual relationship, particularly one where it's going to end because these relationships don't last. So these girls are having sex, oftentimes having sex with older guys, right? Which creates another problem when we look at hypergamy, and they're imprinting themselves with older guys when their brain is not fully developed, and then they're losing that relationship partner. So they're going through a breakup cycle, which causes trauma and damage. And all that trauma and damage doesn't help them develop emotionally because their brains are not fully developed. Like you can go through hardship as an adult with a fully developed brain and build more resiliency. When your brain is not yet fully developed, that those trauma, the trauma and the damage doesn't build resiliency. It just damages you. All right. It just damages your brain and gives you long lasting effects that you now have to try to fix. And ask yourself this question: how many women are out there trying to fix any of these things? Well, they're really not. Most of them are trying to fix it with a new penis. Now we look at the 15-year-old brain. It's a little bit more developed, but it's still very underdeveloped in the emotional areas and some of the cognitive functioning, right? And so the other thing about 15 and 16 is that what's happening is the brain is starting to become more specialized. So you're discarding connections and stuff that you don't need. Well, things like emotional distress and anxiety and all the things that it can be caused by early sexual relationships, Well, the brain is being signaled to hold on to all of these erratic emotional behaviors because the brain thinks it needs it because she's in and out of sexual relationships. So now, in terms of brain development, an average teenager should lose some of those connections that say, hey, be emotionally erratic and crazy. Most teens with a healthy brain are going to lose some of that because the brain and the person feels secure in the world, and so they don't need to hang on to all these distressing emotional tendencies, right? But a girl who's sexually active young, she's not going to release and relieve all those things. Her brain instead is going to hang on to them. And now she's going to act like a crazy person for the rest of her life if she doesn't do anything to change it, because that's how her brain developed. This is why you're on a dating app or you're dating some girl who's 35 years old and then she starts acting like a nutcase. Well, yeah, of course. When she have sex, 15, 16 years old, well, went through an emotional roller coaster, brain told her to be a crazy person. Now she's 35, 40, 50, acting like a crazy person because that's her pattern, you see. So these girls are developing these patterns when they're too young to deal with them because of brain development. We look at the 17-year-old brain. It's better than the 13-year-old brain, but still not fully connected. The emotional areas of the brain, okay, need to develop more. The areas of social interaction and emotional maturity are not fully there yet. So when a girl is having sex at 17, which most sexually active girls who are not part of the celibate category, involuntary celibate category, most 17 girls have had sex by 17 now at this point, right? 50% of all girls, but probably closer to 70% or so of girls today lost their virginity before they hit 17. Well, their brain is not fully able to process social interactions and emotions yet. So she's banging dudes and then breaking up with them and having a guy cheat on her. And she's going through all that stuff as a teenager. What is she doing to her brain? She's damaging her brain. And now you get left the leftovers. Now you're in your 20s trying to date her, or you're in your 30s trying to date her, or 60s trying to date her. It doesn't really matter because all of these things start when they're young, and then they do what? They create this pattern of bad and broken relationships and bad behavior towards men. And so they develop, the older they get, the more bad, crappy behavior they have towards men. Now, there's a small percentage of women, of course, who work on themselves, but most girls say they work on themselves, but they're really working on new penis and they're working on their horoscope and they're working on trying to have more of a narcissistic view of the world to make themselves feel better for their mistakes that they don't want to take accountability for. These are the normal patterns of like a lot of women. All right. It's a special, smaller percentage that actually do real work on themselves to unravel some of the damage and the trauma that they did to themselves when they were younger, and that adults in their life promoted or supported or allowed. 21-year-old brain now, we're getting into a developed, almost fully mature brain. Now, this brain in a girl is about fully mature in a female. In a male, it's still going to mature for another couple more years. Some females might, some women might have more maturity in brain growth over the next couple years past 21. But at least by 21, we can see from the growth and from the color schemes here on the brain scan that we're dealing with a mature person. So when we're dealing with a mature brain, like on the right versus an immature brain on the left, what kinds of things happen when the mature brain on the right gets into a sexual relationship? Let's say the first sexual relationship a girl has, she waits till she's 21. Well, she has now a fully mature brain. And if she's not a person with a mental disorder or problems to put her in the involuntary celibate category, right? She has social skills. She's gone on dates. She's been to homecoming. She's had boyfriends. She's just choosing to not be sexually active, which is a great choice for her brain development. Because now, when she does decide to get into a sexual relationship, she has the capacity to handle that relationship in a mature way. When she gets that flood of emotion and oxytocin and all of the up and down stuff that happens with a girl's emotions when she first gets with a guy, she's going to have all of the abilities to handle that in a mature manner. She's going to build good patterns rather than bad patterns. Even if a relationship breaks up or she has heartbreak, she's more likely to learn from that heartbreak and to build better patterns moving forward because her brain is mature enough to handle it. When a girl's over here on the left with an immature brain and she goes through that heartache and problem, what ends up happening is that she ends up having an inability to handle it. So she creates trauma and damage and she does maladaptive or bad behaviors to try to cover it or overcome it. And then she carries all those things into the next relationship. Now, I did a longer video as to why it's damaging for young girls to have sex, and I break it down even further. But this is kind of the too long didn't read version of that for guys who are in the dating market. Now, if you guys are raising children, you have daughters, or you have influence on kids like nieces, nephews, stuff like that, you want to promote waiting to have sex. Not you can do it for moral reasons and other things if you would like, but the main reason to do it is because of science, because brain development. And if you want your niece, nephew, daughter to have a better prognosis for having healthy and happy relationships as an adult, it behooves them to wait to have sex and not to have sex as children. And all of you adults who are out there promoting and rationalizing younger teens having sex, you kind of should be ashamed of yourself if you're going to continue to do that after seeing this data. Now, what does that mean to you guys who are out in the dating market? Well, you do have that 1/3 in the dating market who might be capable of a relationship because they've been doing more or less serial monogamy. But the problem is, by having sex too early, is they still go through breakup trauma. And they're not practicing being with somebody for 10 years, like in a marriage, right? Or 20 or 50 years. They're practicing being with somebody for 6 months, a year, or 2 years. So there's a lot more relationship skills that have to happen to be happy and excited about your relationship past the honeymoon phase, past the 2 year mark. It's better probably for their brains that they're not practicing just outright promiscuity, which we have enough data to say that that's probably a good way for a girl to ruin her capability of pair bonding. She can probably pair bond with the right guy in the right circumstance, but she's still bringing in all that baggage into the dating market with you into the relationship. And this is why you see a lot of the behavior you're seeing amongst women in the dating market. If we could boil it down to one thing, it's they started having sexual relationships too early. And for many of them, we're having those sexual relationships too often. This ruins their ability to pair bond, and it sets them on a pathway of bad behavior and learned behaviors and bad habits that build and build. So by the time she gets to you and you're like, hey, she wants a relationship, she wants to date, you want to have some fun, and you're just met, you're about to go start dating. She has all these poor and unhealthy patterns built. And she's the more she's invested in you, once that honeymoon phase goes away, especially, the more all of those bad, shitty, terrible patterns are going to get unleashed and end up in your lap to have to deal with as a man. Okay. So what's the solution to this? Go black pill, give up, just become a celibate, cry about it, talk about being a Sigma male. All right. What are you going to do? What's your option? Well, the option is to get better. Okay. That's the option. Your skill set as a man in 2025 in seduction and frame and having relationship skills and skills in vetting and finding the right girl, that skill set has to be 10 to 20 times more elevated, maybe even more than your grandparents and great grandparents. Back in the 1950s, girls were more capable. We can look at it from the data. Today, girls are less capable. So you have to vet out and find the ones that have potential And then from there, you have to lead the relationship and do good behaviors yourself as a man and lead her to do good behaviors also. So you guys can have a happy, healthy future or just a happy, healthy dating life if you're just going to keep it casual. So you need to up your seduction skills. You need to up your game skills. That's the only thing that's going to save you in this dating market. And that's where my community comes in. It's free. Click the link in the description. Last thing I'll say, because I can't say it enough and we don't talk about it enough, is you guys need to be promoting in whatever small way in your life for girls, especially to wait until they're fully adults to have sex. Not 18, not still in high school, but to wait even a little bit longer. Okay. If they can wait till they're 21, those girls are going to be so much better off and so much more capable of happiness and having a good, healthy life. If a girl can stay off the pole, away from drugs, and away from penis till she's 21, her prognosis for a good life is astronomically better than any other girl who started those things early. And if you're a girl who did start those things early, which is most of you, so I'm talking about all 5 of you who might see this video, right? If that's you, which is probably you need to drop your arrogance about the dating market, thinking you know about men and know anything, and start to go backwards and fix all of the damage and trauma that you've built over the years from your own bad behavior and from your own bad relationships. So you can be with somebody else in the future that could end up being a good relationship. All right. As much, you're only going to get as good of a relationship as your skill sets will allow. And that goes both for men and women. Like the video, hit the subscribe button. Take care.